Take a deep breath right now. Feels refreshing, doesn't it? Oxygen may not be the most abundant gas in our atmosphere, but it is by far the most important one. Now, imagine this: in the very next moment, oxygen across the entire planet disappears. Not forever, not even for a full minute, just for 5 short seconds. At first, you might think 5 seconds is nothing. After all, most of us can easily hold our breath for half a minute. But here's the shocking truth. While your lungs may not even notice, the world around you would instantly fall apart in ways you could never imagine. And by the time oxygen returns, Earth would already look like a very different place. So, what would actually happen if our planet lost oxygen for just 5 seconds? Stay with me until the end, because the scariest part comes last. The role of oxygen in first global reactions. Oxygen makes up about 21% of our atmosphere, with nitrogen dominating at around 78%. That 21% may sound small compared to nitrogen, but it is the very backbone of life as we know it. Every breath you take fuels your body. Every drop of water you drink contains oxygen, and even the very ground you stand on is held together by it. But here's the surprising twist. Losing oxygen for just 5 seconds wouldn't actually suffocate you right away. Your body has reserves, and 5 seconds without a breath wouldn't kill anyone instantly. Instead, the disaster begins not inside you, but outside you, in the very environment that supports life. Let's start with structures. Concrete, one of the most widely used materials in the world, relies on oxygen as a binding agent. Without oxygen, concrete isn't concrete, it's just dust. That means iconic landmarks like the Hoover Dam, the Pantheon Dome, bridges, skyscrapers, and countless buildings would instantly crumble to the ground. Imagine entire cities collapsing in silence, not because of an earthquake or explosion, but because oxygen simply blinked out of existence for a moment. But it doesn't stop there. Metals would behave in a way you've never seen before. Right now, untreated metals don't fuse together because oxygen creates a thin protective layer known as oxidation. That thin coating keeps metals from sticking to one another. But without oxygen, that layer disappears instantly, and every piece of exposed metal would suddenly weld together. Cars, planes, tools, even the phone in your hand could suddenly fuse with whatever metal it touches. The world would turn into a bizarre junkyard of welded metal scraps. And then there's your body. Losing oxygen doesn't just affect the air you breathe. It also alters atmospheric pressure. Oxygen accounts for about 21% of that pressure, and without it, the sudden drop would be catastrophic. The change would be similar to falling over 2,000 meters in altitude in the blink of an eye. Your inner ears wouldn't have time to adapt, and many people's eardrums would rupture instantly. Imagine millions of people around the world clutching their heads in pain at the exact same second. Meanwhile, if you happen to be at the beach on this day, you'll wish you hadn't gone. That's because the ozone layer, the invisible shield that protects us from the sun's ultraviolet rays, is made of oxygen molecules. Without oxygen, the ozone vanishes instantly, and in those 5 seconds, your skin would be scorched by raw UV radiation. You'd experience a painful sunburn almost instantly. So, while your lungs might not even notice the missing oxygen in those 5 seconds, your world would already be collapsing. Buildings turn to dust, metals fuse, your ears burst, and the sun itself feels like it's burning straight into your skin. And yet, this is just the beginning. Stay tuned, because what happens next will bring cars, planes, and the entire sky itself to a standstill. While collapsing buildings, ruptured eardrums, and instant sunburns already sound apocalyptic, the next wave of consequences is even worse. Without oxygen, one of the most fundamental processes on Earth comes to a sudden halt: combustion. Fire simply cannot exist without oxygen. That means every engine that relies on combustion would die instantly. In less than a heartbeat, cars on highways would grind to a halt, trucks carrying supplies would stop dead in their tracks, and ships powered by fuel would lose propulsion. Imagine millions of vehicles suddenly stalling at the exact same time. Highways would become scenes of chaos, not because people ran out of gas, but because the very element that makes fire possible had vanished. And then there are airplanes. Right now, more than 10,000 planes are in the sky at any given moment. Every single one of those aircraft depends on oxygen to burn jet fuel. Without oxygen, the engines stop. That means thousands of planes would instantly lose thrust, becoming nothing more than giant gliders. Some would manage emergency landings if they're close enough to airports. But most, they'd simply fall. The skies around the world would rain steel, fire, and wreckage. For passengers, it would be 5 of the most terrifying seconds imaginable. And when oxygen comes rushing back, it won't restart engines instantly. By then, thousands of planes would already be doomed. Fires everywhere would go out in an instant. While that might sound like a good thing, no wildfires, no house fires. The reality is far more sinister. Fire is also what powers our industries, our power plants, our stoves, even many heating systems. In just those 5 seconds, the world would go dark and cold. And speaking of dark, something even stranger would happen above your head. Normally, sunlight scatters off oxygen molecules in the atmosphere, giving our sky its familiar blue color. Without oxygen, there's nothing to scatter that light. The sky would turn pitch black in the middle of the day. Imagine standing outside at noon, and instead of a bright blue sky, you see the endless blackness of space stretching above you. The psychological impact alone would be immense. Billions of people looking up and realizing the sky had turned into a void. It would feel like the end of the world. And while the sky darkens, your body still isn't safe. That missing oxygen means the protective ozone layer is gone. The ultraviolet radiation pouring down is relentless. In just a few seconds, crops would begin to wilt, leaves would burn, and exposed skin would blister. Farmers' fields, beaches, parks, even entire forests would take damage that couldn't be undone by oxygen's return. The planet itself would bear scars from just 5 seconds of exposure. Think about it. 5 seconds without oxygen, and the world has no fire, no engines, no blue sky, and no protection from the sun. The roads are filled with stalled cars, the seas with stranded ships, and the skies with falling planes. Humanity would be left in shock, scrambling to understand what just happened. And yet, believe it or not, the most terrifying destruction is still waiting, because oxygen isn't just in the air, it's in the very crust of the Earth itself. And if oxygen disappears, even for 5 seconds, the ground beneath your feet might not hold. If you thought crumbling concrete, falling planes, and a black sky were bad enough, brace yourself. Because the biggest shock of all comes from beneath your feet. You see, oxygen isn't just floating in the air we breathe. It makes up nearly 45% of Earth's crust. Rocks, minerals, and soil all rely on oxygen atoms as a crucial part of their molecular structure. Without oxygen, those bonds can't hold together. In just 5 seconds, the very ground under you would begin to disintegrate. Imagine mountains turning to dust in an instant. Skyscrapers, already weakened from crumbling concrete, would sink as the foundation beneath them collapses. The crust of the Earth would literally start to crumble apart, layer by layer. Entire regions could sink or crack open as the bonds holding minerals together vanished. It wouldn't look like an earthquake. It would look like the Earth itself was dissolving into sand. And when oxygen returns 5 seconds later, those broken bonds wouldn't magically snap back into place. The structural damage would already be done. leaving massive scars across the surface of the planet. Now, let's think about the oceans. Water, as you know, is H2O, two hydrogen atoms bonded to one oxygen atom. Remove oxygen, and water ceases to exist in its stable form. For those 5 seconds, the oceans would essentially vaporize. Hydrogen, freed from its oxygen bonds, would expand violently. Vast clouds of hydrogen gas would rise up, while fish, coral reefs, and marine life would be obliterated in an instant. The sight would be unthinkable. Oceans boiling into the air, waves collapsing into nothingness. And while oxygen would return after those 5 seconds, the oceans wouldn't just neatly reform. The disruption would cause massive tsunamis, storms, and long-term instability in Earth's water systems. Life in the seas, from the tiniest plankton to the largest whales, would face extinction-level consequences. The same goes for plants and forests. Every leaf, every tree, every blade of grass depends on oxygen molecules, not just to breathe, but to maintain its physical structure. Without oxygen, chlorophyll molecules break down, cells lose their integrity, and plant tissues collapse. Imagine walking through a forest, only to see trees turn to ash, like dust before your eyes. In just a few seconds, the world's green blanket would vanish, and with it, our planet's ability to produce fresh oxygen in the future. The cycle of life would break in an instant, and then there's the chain reaction. With no stable crust, no oceans, and no plant life, ecosystems would fall apart. Animals that survived the immediate chaos would have no food, no water, and no shelter. The food chain would collapse almost instantly. Humanity, already shaken by collapsing cities and stalled technology, would be facing a planet that no longer looked like Earth. The stability that we take for granted every day, the ground beneath us, the water we drink, the plants we eat, would vanish in a blink. So far, we've seen cities crumble, the skies go dark, the oceans vaporize, and the crust begin to collapse. But as horrifying as that sounds, there's still one more layer to this nightmare. Because when oxygen vanishes, even for just 5 seconds, Earth itself begins to unravel in ways far more terrifying than anything we've seen yet. The very structure of the planet, its rocks, its mountains, even its atmosphere, could collapse completely, leaving humanity in free fall. And if that happens, there's no way back. Up until now, the loss of oxygen has left us with crumbling cities, falling airplanes, vaporizing oceans, and a collapsing crust. But in reality, these are only the opening acts of a much larger catastrophe. Because when you remove oxygen, even for just 5 seconds, you are removing the glue that holds together not just life, but the planet itself. Earth would start to unravel on a scale we can barely imagine. Let's begin with the atmosphere. Right now, oxygen is a major contributor to atmospheric stability. Without it, air pressure plummets by nearly 21% instantly. That may sound like just a number, but in practical terms, it's like dropping from sea level to nearly 2,000 meters of altitude in a blink. The sudden pressure loss wouldn't just rupture eardrums. It would destabilize weather systems across the globe. Storms, winds, and air currents that rely on steady pressure gradients would collapse. Massive shockwaves would ripple through the skies as nature tries to rebalance itself. The weather you know today, sunny skies, gentle winds, predictable patterns, would turn into violent chaos. Meanwhile, the Earth's magnetic protection would weaken. Oxygen plays a critical role in forming the ionosphere, a layer that shields us from cosmic radiation. Without it, solar particles and cosmic rays would strike the surface directly. In just those 5 seconds, radiation levels would spike. The damage wouldn't just be to your skin. It would penetrate deeper, affecting DNA, increasing cancer risks, and wreaking havoc on living cells. For astronauts or satellites orbiting Earth, the sudden exposure could fry circuits and damage systems beyond repair. space technology. The very eyes and ears we use to understand our universe could be destroyed instantly. And then comes the crust itself. Since nearly half of the Earth's crust is made of oxygen, its removal causes tectonic plates to destabilize. Entire continental plates could collapse or grind uncontrollably against one another. Imagine earthquakes happening simultaneously across every continent. Seismic waves tearing through cities, mountains splitting apart, valleys collapsing. Volcanoes, which rely on pressure balance deep within the crust, would erupt violently, spewing molten rock and toxic gases. The ground wouldn't feel solid anymore. It would feel like quicksand, shifting and collapsing beneath your feet. Humanity would be standing on a world that no longer supports them. Let's not forget the oceans. Those massive hydrogen clouds released when oxygen vanished wouldn't just disappear. When oxygen returns, they could ignite explosively. Huge firestorms might sweep across coastlines as hydrogen reacts violently with the reintroduced oxygen. Tsunamis and floods would devastate coastal cities, while firestorms tear apart everything left standing. Earth wouldn't just lose oxygen. It would come back in a way that creates even more destruction. At this point, survival becomes almost impossible. Without stable land, breathable air, or functional ecosystems, humanity would face extinction. 5 seconds may not kill you directly, but the chain reaction it triggers would wipe out everything we know. Life as we've built it, cities as we've constructed them, and civilizations as we've nurtured them would all collapse in a blink. The scariest part, you wouldn't even have time to react. By the time you realized oxygen was gone, by the time you felt your ears pop or saw the sky darken, the damage would already be irreversible. And once oxygen returns, it doesn't fix what's broken. It only reveals the scars left behind. So what's left after this global apocalypse? Is there any hope, or would humanity vanish forever? Stick around, because in the final part, we'll explore what the ultimate end would look like and why you can breathe easy knowing it will never truly happen. By now, Earth is unrecognizable. The skies are black, cities are reduced to rubble, oceans have boiled away into chaos, and the very crust of the planet is breaking apart. All of this from just 5 seconds without oxygen. It's terrifying to imagine how much destruction can unfold in less time than it takes to snap your fingers. But what would the ultimate end look like if this truly happened? Let's paint the final picture. Without oxygen, the structural bonds in Earth's crust collapse. That means the ground isn't stable anymore. It's crumbling like sand slipping through your fingers. Entire continents would start to fracture. Mountains would tumble like piles of dust. Valleys would cave in, and tectonic plates would grind together in violent chaos. Earthquakes wouldn't just be regional, they would be global, hitting every city at once. Volcanoes would roar to life as pressure built deep within the mantle is released uncontrollably. Rivers of lava would pour across lands already stripped of life, leaving behind only fire and ash. As this chaos unfolds, humanity would face a grim reality. For the billions of people across the planet, survival would no longer depend on holding your breath. It would depend on whether the very ground beneath you could hold at all. Families would be separated, infrastructure destroyed, and the systems that keep our modern world functioning, transport, communication, energy, would vanish in an instant. Civilization itself would collapse faster than anyone could comprehend. And then comes the cruel twist. When oxygen finally returns after those 5 seconds, it doesn't bring relief. Instead, it makes things worse. Remember the massive hydrogen clouds that formed when the oceans split apart? The instant oxygen reappears, hydrogen combusts violently, creating explosions and firestorms across coastlines and in the atmosphere. Cities near oceans would be wiped out by massive blasts, while fires rage across landscapes already devastated by collapse. Instead of bringing life back, oxygen's return would spark a second wave of destruction. What about the survivors? If anyone managed to withstand the earthquakes, the collapsing buildings, the volcanic eruptions, and the fires, they would still face a world that no longer resembles the one they once knew. Without plants, crops, and ecosystems, there's no food supply. With the ozone layer shredded, the radiation pouring down from the sun would make Earth nearly uninhabitable, and with oceans disrupted, weather systems would spiral out of control, turning storms into endless disasters. Humanity, if it clung on at all, would be reduced to scattered groups, fighting for survival on a hostile planet. It's a chilling scenario. 5 seconds that erase millions of years of stability. But here's the part where you can breathe again, literally. Because the good news is, this event is scientifically impossible. Oxygen doesn't just vanish. It's locked into Earth's chemistry, woven into the air, the water, and the rocks around us. It can't simply disappear. Not in 5 seconds, not in 5 centuries. The scenario you just imagined is purely speculative, a thought experiment that shows just how fragile our world really is when one element is taken away. So take a deep breath right now. Feel that oxygen filling your lungs, keeping your body alive, holding up the buildings around you, shielding you from the sun, and binding together the very ground beneath your feet. Oxygen is life, and thankfully, it's not going anywhere. If you enjoyed this journey into the impossible, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell. There are countless more W-shaped IF scenarios waiting to be explored, and you won't want to miss them. Until next time, keep wondering, keep questioning, and never take your next breath for granted.